Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our seminar today on sales, marketing, and licensing of eBooks for the K-12 Canadian educational market. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. During the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A portion to ask for questions or use the raise hand. Now to introduce your host, Barbara Howson is a publishing consultant and author of the upcoming Metadata Marketing, Sales, and Licensing for the K-12 Market Report that is coming soon. Take it away, Barbara.
Thank you, Paula. I am going to share my screen. There, can everybody see it? Great. All right, hello and welcome everybody to the ebook marketing to the K-12 market. This seminar is based on a report commissioned by eBOUND and ACP, written by myself and metadata specialist Amanda Lee. We also commissioned two educational specialists, Mary Sadler, who's the former VP of Nelson and VP of Sales at Jump Math, and Candace Hummel, who is a teacher with the TDSB. And finally, Leslie Boodle, who you all know, Marketing Director at Orca Books, helped us interview publishers on our behalf. Overall, we interviewed 13 educators and a number of different platforms, including Overdrive, Mac, and Tubble Books, just to name a few. Sadly, Follets didn't answer our emails, though we tried numerous times and different contacts, but to no avail. So the information we have is based on all sorts of different platforms, but not Follets, which is too bad. But I gather their sales have decreased, and I think they were doing a bit of a reorganization when we were doing this project, so maybe it's no surprise. The report will be published shortly and goes into much more depth on marketing and sales and metadata and licensing than I can do in an hour seminar. But I just wanted to highlight some key findings and recommendations. Please ask questions along the way. Paula, I can't see the question and answers, so I'm going to rely on you to ask them for me on my screen. So yeah, I can't see you put your hand up for chatting, so sorry. Haven't done this in a bit. All right, and on we go. So what I'm going to cover is eBooks in the schools and libraries, key digital platforms, metadata, the good and the bad, pricing, yes, it is a part of marketing, and marketing in the real world. So to begin with, schools and libraries. Are they using eBooks? eBooks had obviously a huge resurgence during COVID. However, there's been a decrease since kids are going back to schools and people are going back into libraries. There was also an issue of device ratio to devices to students. So that remains a challenge in many districts because they want to be fair to everyone. And this certainly became apparent during COVID. Pricing remains an issue for the libraries and the teachers who acquire books at the school districts. However, the accessibility options for eBooks remains a key interest of educators, especially in the educational market. They really like the read-alongs. They really like the text showing up. They really like the kind of things like that, or highlighted text, which obviously you can't get in print books. I really recommend getting to know your local schools and libraries and see what they're doing with eBooks. Many of them are different. Many use them in different ways. We talked to someone, an educator out in Newfoundland, who was responsible for buying all resources. And basically they relied on the libraries. They didn't really buy them for schools. They bought them for, they relied on the library to sort of supply the schools. And also, I would really recommend getting to know the teachers and the librarians personally, now, especially now that we can get back into personal meetings. I was just at OLA with eBOUND, and I think everybody was really excited to be back in person. A lot of the people that I met weren't going into sessions. They were going just to see the exhibitors and see what we were up to. There's reading for the love of it, which just happened, and IT for K-12, which is out in Vancouver, and they're going to have one, I think it's in September. So this is just a couple of, or a few things that you can do, but I would really recommend seeing what else is happening. I believe in Saskatchewan, they're going to do Learn Saskatchewan. So there are a number of places to meet teacher and librarians. Number 5 is sort of something that I touched on earlier. Many of the school boards rely on public library collections. So all because with your metadata and selling, you might be selling just directly to the libraries, know that the schools are using them as well. And a number of the teachers talked about using the resources for independent reading. Once the buyer from the TDSB talked about wrapping the curriculum around the student. I have to say the concept or the image kind of freaks me out a little bit, but she was really excited about it and really wanted to stress that each book or reading resource that they use needed to fit the individual. They tended not to buy class sets. They tended to look for the individual reading level of each student and try and fit the book to the student. But the teachers also want resources that support the curricula and that can support them. So your teacher's guides and other things that you're developing are still very useful. So the different platforms, as I said, we talked to a number of different platforms except Follett's. So generally speaking, what I recommend is having a deal with as many of the platforms as you possibly can, knowing that not all your books are suitable. Mackin is a great example. They do not publish or on their platform textbooks. They use trade books that fit into the educational system. Tumble books, it's more of a submission process. They don't accept everything. The books and their way of saying it have to be tumbled. I don't know if everybody's been on the Tumble Books platform, but it's really incredible what they do with the books and very exciting. But it's almost like they make a mini movie of the book. So obviously a really lengthy book is not going to work, though they are trying to move up and down different age levels. I really recommend that you pitch to them universal themes and Tumble Books in particular. Pick the books, especially since they're very selective, on what will work as in a wide range of uses and themes. Do you meet with them? I think it's really, really important to try and meet with them, whether you meet with them at EBMA. And I see this actually as an opportunity, and probably the ACP and eBound will hate me at this point, but I really see them as maybe using those associations to sort of create an opportunity for publishers to speed date with them, especially smaller publishers who might not have the opportunity to go to places like EBMA where you can sit down and have your 7-minute conversation with them. But I do think meeting with them and showing them what you do, especially since Canada is, for most of these platforms, is a side venue. The US is their most important market, and Canada is, basically in their probably view, and I'm putting words in their mouth, so don't quote me on this, though this is being taped, a mini US. So I think the more opportunity we can meet with them and talk about the different needs that Canadian educators have, I think the better it is for all of us as Canadian publishers. As I said before, not every book will work on all platforms, so don't pitch, don't waste their time submitting books that don't work on those platforms. I know you love all your books, as you should, but unfortunately, in this case, there might be some favored children, so please be aware of that. Find out how they highlight and how they market to schools and libraries, and work with them to highlight your books. Overdrive tends to use pricing as a way of highlighting books, which I have to say, when I was VP of sales at Anansi, I kind of didn't want to do, but I have to say it's been years since I've been VP of sales, but I'm kind of coming around to playing with price a little bit more in the school and library market, especially when you can tie it to sort of say series. If you have a new book in a series coming out, discounting the earlier books to garner interest for the new book, or if there's a new book by an author, maybe discounting their backlist. If there's a new series you're launching, maybe discounting them for the first month. I think playing, and especially working with Overdrive to play with those kind of things, prices, I think is actually a really good way to market the books. Mackin does hot lists. I would recommend highly getting on their hot lists. Most of these marketing opportunities are pay to play, but they're worth it. Most of these platforms are American, as I said before, and that puts us at a bit of a disadvantage. One of the buyers at TDSB said that they didn't work with Sora because Sora would, their algorithm would highlight things rather than letting TDSB select books that they wanted to highlight. So they use Follett instead. And I think that's a really, really important point to think about. The platforms, are so focused on the US, and I completely understand why, that they overlooked the thing that we have a different form of government. We have a different, we've had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We have Orange Shirt Day. We have Canada Day, for God's sakes. And, it's not on July 4th. So it's just, they don't seem to recognize, though, a way of sort of highlighting our Canadian content or our Canadian authors. Some of them do not. You might supply the metadata for Canadian author, but they don't actually ingest it. So that means the teacher who looks for a Canadian author won't necessarily find your Canadian authors. So, and I'll talk about this more in the metadata section, but you need to sort of be able to work with them to highlight your Canadian data, which will be of interest to Canadian authors or libraries and teachers. Okay, and then on to metadata. Metadata, the thing we love to love, really. We can all come around to it. Okay, should you tailor the data for the educational market or the consumer market? It depends on the book, and it depends on where you want that book to see the most sales. So you're going to have to decide on a book by book basis. And I don't know if you do this when you're doing your marketing plans to begin with, but this is one of the things that you should be highlighting for your keywords as to whether this is going to be through the educational or consumer market. We got a lot of pushback from some of the platforms who were complaining about, and I had never heard this phrase before, keyword stuffing. So basically, they have a limited number of spaces that they're going to only take so many of your keywords, and so that will be truncated. So you could put in as many keywords as you want in the metadata, but you should know that some of them will only take up to 10 or 15. So you need to be aware of that when you're submitting data. And maybe, maybe Amazon is, the primary market for you. And so you do your metadata and you do your keywords and all that kind of stuff geared towards that market and not to the educational market. Knowing what we heard from the teachers and the educators and the librarians is that they do go to Amazon to look up stuff. They might buy it through Overdrive, but they go to Wikipedia to find out if the author is Canadian. They go to Amazon or Indigo. They're heavily reliant on the Forest of Reading lists, which a lot of the platforms sort of didn't highlight in the same way that I would like to see them highlight. So be aware of that. DeMarc, which is sort of one of the only Canadian platforms, and up until now they've been focused largely on the French market, doesn't use keywords at all. So you really need to be aware of that. The way the different platforms use your different data. Consider modifying keywords for the K-12 market. Add information such as awards and add keywords that might interest educators. And by that, I mean use themes. Do not focus on sort of curriculum, but use general themes rather than specific curriculum trends. And if it's really important, put it in the book description. You're 99% sure that the book's description will show up on all of these platforms. And so that people can search, so it will be part of the search. And then finally, audit. Make sure that your data is showing up on in the way that you thought it was going to show up on library and consumer sites. I can't highlight this enough. When I worked at Anansi with Amanda, I would drive her crazy because I'd go on to Amazon and the book wouldn't show up the way I thought it was going to show up. So I would go over to Amanda and say, this book isn't showing up this way. But it is, a lot of people just sort of put the data out there and then never actually look at what the consumer or the teacher is actually looking at to make sure that it's showing up the way you think it is. And this is one of the good things about if you can meet with Follets and if you can meet with Overdrive or whatever, if you can't see what the teacher is seeing, you can ask them for a screenshot and then of sort of key select titles from each season to make sure that what you think is showing up is showing up. Especially with Overdrive, where they have two sort of set interpretations of data. They have display data, which is what the publisher sends, and then they have interpreted data. So interpreted data for them is age range. So you might think your book is for 9 to 12, and they say it's for 7 to 10. Now there's some crossover, so it might not be a problem, but maybe it is a problem. Maybe it really is an older title, and you are seeing it in a age range where you don't think it's where you don't think it should be. So I think things like that is really important, and make sure that you update your data, especially when it gets on a tree award or whatever. A lot of people don't go back to the data and do that. Paula, any questions?
None yet.
I'm wowing them with information.
Everyone's just absorbing all of it.
Okay, pricing is part of marketing, and I've already talked a little bit about this. what we heard from the teachers especially, and I'm going to quote some of them, so I'm going to read this. Class set pricing is definitely a barrier, as the price for 2 months for some books was close to the price of buying paperback copies. Teachers don't want to go beyond $25 for one use per copy. $40 and 26 uses. Previews aren't included, so that means the teacher needs to download the book, review it, and then lose a use. So the teachers are very, very, very aware of the pricing and what, and same with librarians, and what works and what doesn't for them. And it continues to be an issue. And each of you as publishers are really going to have to decide on what is important to you. And obviously, it's competitive. We can't talk about specific pricing. But I think what I really, really recommend is trying to use as many different pricing possibilities as you can. Overdrive, for example, does 1 copy per 1 user, single title use, collection use, cost per circulation, and class sets. And you are not limited as a publisher to one or the other. You can tick all those boxes and your book can be in all these different boxes or in these different ways of selling. And that is something that you guys have to look at and decide for each of you. But what we're hearing from the teachers and the librarians is that they are really, really appreciative of having different possibilities of working with your book in different ways. The other thing is playing with pricing, as I mentioned before in the marketing, is working with Overdrive and using price dynamically, especially with older titles, and seeing, and I really recommend playing with it, but also monitoring it and seeing if your sales go up or go down. Often we do this, but don't sort of look backwards and see, oh, well, this actually worked. Oh, and this didn't. And I think I would highly recommend that more and more sort of research into pricing would be recommended. Schools obviously are looking for more permissive pricing models. And so you should, as I said, you should work with each of the platforms to see what you can do. Obviously, some platforms such as Epic, they do it on subscription. And so there is no possibility of playing with pricing. If you want to read more about this, there's an organization called Readers First, and they did an e-lending paper. And I would recommend reading that e-lending paper. It's quite interesting, and the Council for Urban Librarians have sanctioned this paper and are fully signed on to it. You should be aware that basically in this paper, they are using the multinationals pricing structure, not independent publishers. Independent publishers are not mentioned at all in this paper at all. Marketing. Make sure your metadata is strong. I know I've said this a couple of times, but it is key. It's key to be getting that book up on Amazon or Indigo into the libraries and making sure that your data is relevant. And when teachers do a search on Indigenous, they find your book, or if they look for Orange Shirt Day, they find your book. Or if they're looking for the Hackmatack long list, short list, they can find your book. One of the things that we found when doing research in marketing materials produced by publishers, and also on sort of digitally available resources such as 49 Shelf or 49 Teacher, was that the digital availability was not highlighted. The print price was there, the print ISBN was there, but often or not, the digital information price, EISBN, whatever, was not there. Or, and maybe you don't want to put it there, but why not? Why not make sure that people are aware that you have a digital edition of the book? I think the more touch points for marketing your ebooks, the better. And it seems to be, in my mind, overlooked, and therefore people, especially teachers, are not necessarily aware. And I think we assume that everybody knows that everything's available in all editions, and I don't think that's necessarily assumed outside of the industry. So especially when you launch a book, I really, really think it's important to highlight that all these other versions are available, whether it's ebook, audiobook, print book, PDF, an accessible format, etc. I think this is sort of your one kick at the can, since we're so frontlist driven for marketing, and for it to be that information to be out there. Work with the platforms to highlight your books, especially with Canadian content focused titles. I think, and maybe this, I don't know if this is an association thing that we should take on, or whether this is on a publisher by publisher basis, but because most of the platforms are American, and as I said, Canadian market is a smaller market, they do not focus on Canadian content book, and especially when it's like Overdrive and they're working on an algorithm, when they're talking about books about lakes, Canadian lake books are not going to show up at the top. It's going to be an American lake book, or I don't know, history of the War of 1812 or whatever. It's going to be the American book, not the Canadian books, that's going to show up. So, and we definitely have a different version of who won the War of 1812. So I think it's really, really important to try and work with these American platforms. And I kind of have a soft spot for DeMarc. They're trying to branch out to English Canada. They've already started in Manitoba and BC, and maybe this is an opportunity for us to work more closely with them to see if we can get a Canadian digital wholesaler, because we do not really have that. Tumble Books does not buy everything, and I wouldn't really sort of call them a wholesaler in the same way as Overdrive or Follett. So DeMarc might be a really interesting opportunity to work with them more closely to see if they are willing to expand their library to more English titles. They're starting, but they have a long way to go. Meet in person with teachers and librarians. As I said before, there's lots of opportunities, and I think we need to get to know more about their needs. And find out about the ebook buyers and the tech specialists at the local school district. For those of you who have children in the school system, you have a lot of information that you could be giving to your sales and marketing people, especially if you're editors. And then, have you signed up for educator and librarian newsletters? There's tons of them actually in Canada. I have a resource guide coming after this. If you were signed up for the Canadian news, educator news, you would have found out that like the next day that Ontario was starting to do in grade 11, have Indigenous only books for the English courses. And you could have been right on that, because all of you guys have some really good Indigenous writers who could have fit the curriculum. So these are the resources that I was talking about. The e-lending paper is the one from the First Readers Organization, Teach Canada, Ed Canada Network Magazine, Canadian School Libraries, Education News Canada, Teaching Library, Librarianship, etc. The other resource I would highly recommend is Amanda Lee, as part of our package with this report, is doing metadata training. And it is personal to each publisher. In this link is her schedule. It's limited, but she has slots for up to 20 minutes where you can talk to her on an individual basis for individual metadata problems or issues or anything. And I highly recommend you take advantage of her incredible knowledge on metadata and how best to use it. Paula, did you have?
Yeah, so we don't have a question exactly from Kieran from BPAA, but we do have a comment. So Kieran says, not a question, but DeMarc's Kantuk Station is a platform we use for the Read Alberta ebook and Prairie Indigenous ebook collections. We've been working with them since 2016, and their platform is in all Alberta libraries.
Okay. I did not realize they were in Alberta. I thought they were just in BC and Manitoba. So that's great. Good. They're expanding even further. So go for it. The other thing with keywords, and I put up the BC curriculum here because when we were sort of researching keywords, the way the BC government has laid out their curriculum, we found was the easiest way to sort of garner themes on a per age or per grade level. And I can't recommend this link enough if you want to sort of go down a little rabbit hole of curriculum themes that you might want to add to your metadata. Obviously, curriculum is different across each province, but there are certain themes that carry through. Some themes might be at an older age group, but Ontario certainly had an in-depth on their curriculum, an in-depth look, but it was almost too in-depth. So we really actually focused on BC because of how clear it was. So I highly recommend having a look if you want to sort of do a deep dive on your themes and maybe update your themes. So final thoughts. It's Friday. I'm going to end probably early since nobody had any questions. So that's good because it is Friday and you all sort of want to maybe do other things and maybe even go home early. So metadata is hugely important. I can't highlight that enough. Please sign up for Amanda's course or 20 minutes and get some help. No marketing plan will be the same for each publisher. You need to work in a way that's best for your content. And you need to figure out from your sales which platform is working best for your books. And then I would really, really focus on that platform and really try to build up that relationship even more. Play with pricing and track the results. I think this is really important, and I don't think we do enough of this. And I think it will help sales, but it will also help you figure out where maybe the sweet spot is for the price and figure out what sells best. And as I said before, with the pricing, try and be on as many of the different uses for your book as possible. One copy, one use, classroom sets, tick as many boxes as you feel comfortable so that your book will appear in as many different ways to the buyer as possible. And then work more closely with the platforms. As I said, I think if we could maybe work with ACP or eBOUND and do some speed dating, maybe during the AGM. Kate is probably thankful she's leaving. It's just, we did this years ago with Indigo and some other organizations, and I thought it worked really well. And especially for smaller publishers who might come in, I don't know if you guys are going to be doing the AGM in person, but you know, if you're spending the money to come to wherever the AGM is, and you can get Overdrive to come up and sit down and have one-on-one meetings with people, then you can really figure out what is working well and on an individual basis, because obviously we're all different as publishers in so many ways. So that's it for me.
All
Any
right.
questions, comments?
Yeah, we've got a couple of comments. So Alexander says, great info. Thank you. Karen from Owl Kids would like us to send the links out to all participants. When this is over, we will definitely be sending out the links, and this will also be posted on the eBound website. And Alexandra is asking if we will be able to watch this again. Definitely. This will also, we'll send a newsletter out, and we'll be posting the webinar in its entirety on the eBound website.
And Paula, when's the report going to be released?
That I'm not 100% sure, but Jessica, did we have a firm date for the release?
We don't have a firm date. It's almost ready. We just have a few acknowledgements that we need to include in the final version. And then once those are out, it should be released. We're not releasing it publicly at this time, I believe, but it will be posted on the members only portion of the ACP website. And the text itself is not going to change from the version that was circulated to the Children's Committee. So if you read that version, then you have read the information already.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
And Glenn says, much appreciated. Thanks, Barbara.